holidays, everyone. Welcome to the last episode of the year. It has been fun. I will do a recap for you all, probably for the new year, as I set goals heading into 2023. But today, as we head in, or we're actually in full swing for the holiday season, I kind of wanted to talk to you about this hole that people dig themselves in. And it is the purchasing things that they absolutely don't need just because they're on sale. And guess what's on sale right now? Cars, end of the year car sales heading into 2023. Everybody's trying to get all the 2022 cars off their lot so that they can make space for new inventory. And they are trying to market to you all to pick up a new car. But do you really need a new car? No, you don't. And have you really been waiting for the holidays to come around so that you could purchase that new car? I suspect that you probably weren't. Either your car was dying already and has been on its deathbed and can make it another 3 or 4 months, or your car is not dying at all and you just want a new one and you're starting to complain about how that car is just like raggedy and not going to take you to where you want to go. Cars are actually that thing that will take you from point A to point B, whether it is a broke down, beat up, jalopy, or a big fancy Bentley driving you down the road. And so today we just want to talk a little bit about car purchasing and all the things you need to be thinking about. Chloe is here with me. I know I haven't let her in to say anything as of yet, but she is here. Chloe, say what's up to the people.
Hi, everybody.
All right. And you know that, well, maybe you haven't listened to this before and you're just getting started listening to money stuff for the end of the year, already setting up your goals for next year. So Chloe and I do a series called Know Better, Do Better. And at the very beginning of every episode, we do what we call trends, taxes, and tea, where we are bringing information about the latest trends, keeping you up to date on current events, telling you some things that are going to save you money on taxes. And sometimes we're just giving straight up tea related to our money topic. Chloe, what do you have for us today as it relates to trends, taxes, and tea?
Yeah, the biggest trend right now is electric vehicles. So, Lauren, I'm sure you've had plenty of clients, just about every client you talk to, ask about getting an electric car. So I know I have. So they're definitely gaining popularity and market share. In the third quarter of this year, electric vehicle sales accounted for 6.1% of the total auto market. So that seems kind of small compared to the number of clients that are asking us about them. But that number's doubled since 2021.
Doubled since 2021. So it's growing pretty quick.
Yeah. And then, of course, Tesla dominates, the sales with their Model Y, Model 3, and then the Model X and the Model S. So those are in order of popularity. But the Chevy and Ford are coming right behind them.
They're trying to keep up. Come on, Chevy and Ford, you can do it. Stay in the market so there's someone to compete against. You got this.
Yeah, someone affordable to compete against.
Right. Yes, yeah. Electric cars are definitely all the rage. And we'll talk a little bit more about to purchase or not to purchase in just a moment. But one other thing I saw recently in the news was that Mercedes-Benz and Apple have partnered up and announced that they are doing and announced that they have Apple Music with spatial audio now in various vehicles. So what the heck is spatial audio was the first thing I wanted to know. I was like, this sounds fancy, but also a partnership with Mercedes-Benz is going to be something that's a little bit more new agey, if you will. Spatial audio is a 360-degree sound format that recreates a surround sound effect. To me, this sounds like really fancy. It sounds like a way to get people to be excited about purchasing a Mercedes, which, it's already a luxury vehicle, get people to spend money that they don't necessarily need to, but really a way to be further distracted in your car, like we need another with all the cars on the road and the phones and the blinging and the dinging and I'm really concerned about this very fancy surround sound that's going to sound awesome, but also maybe isn't necessary when you're trying to get from point A to point B.
Well, yeah, sometimes even listening to music, I get distracted if I hear something that sounds like a police siren or like an ambulance or something. It is very distracting for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes for them.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into the main topic. We are talking all things car purchasing today. So let's first talk about buying versus leasing, because I get a lot of clients that are just like, oh, no, I lease. I like to have something new every so often. who would want to buy their car? Then you get the kind of the other end of the parameters, like, yeah, I bought it, and I plan to keep it forever. And then 2 or 3 years later, they're just like, well, forever's already here, and I need another car. So, what have you seen, or what should we consider as we think about buying versus leasing?
Yeah, so there's not really a good option. It's kind of like buying versus renting a house. Like I don't think that, one is always better than the other. It really depends on, kind of like your lifestyle, thinking about, how many miles you drive, what's your budget, what's the purpose of the car. So we can kind of talk through a few like pros and cons for each, and then we can talk about how to determine which one's best. But yeah, so for leasing, the good things about leasing are the things that people enjoy the most about leasing is that, of course, you get a newer vehicle and you have the opportunity to get a new car every few years. Once the lease is up, you can trade that one in, get a new lease. So that's kind of the big appeal to people that get leases. There's also little to no, maintenance or repairs in the first few years. And so, typically cars are covered at least for the first, 3 years or so. And so that's typically about the length of a lease. And so, outside of just regular oil changes or regular things that you would have to do to maintain the car, most of the big things would be covered by warranty during that time that you're leasing the car. And then I say the other thing is, of course, you can get a more luxury car than you otherwise would be able to afford. So a lot of times if you have a budget for a car and you want it to buy that car outright, it's going to be a lot more expensive versus when you're leasing a car, you're basically paying for the amount of the depreciation over that time that you're leasing it. So the payments will be a little bit lower than buying that same car outright.
So it's like, ooh, I get to drive something bigger than my budget or better than my budget, and I get to turn it in and get something else. I think one of the things I always bump into as it relates to leasing is, people always say this as it relates to cars. Like, I'm so tired of throwing away money on rent. But those same people seem to not really think that it's throwing away money, kind of renting a car, if you will, in the form of a lease. But I always say, just like look into the math, like constantly. So people are like, oh, like $400 is now like kind of what's become a normal car payment. And you're paying that forever and ever in perpetuity. Like that's $4,800 that you spend over the course of a year. To have kind of like a nothing to show for a situation. And there are leases that are much more expensive. I just know that this is like a pretty standard number that's being used. And so, 10 years down the road, you spent $48,000 on a vehicle. And then you're like, maybe I won. But also, car insurance is another piece of the puzzle. And there is still maintenance, even though you are leasing that car. So I think the math is a very important piece of how much car can I afford and whether or not I should be leasing. But then also thinking about like, well, if I lease this, am I actually doing something that's good for my overall financial picture in light of what my financial goals are?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, Lauren, sometimes those lease payments can get high. I mean, I've seen, $800 a month lease payments. And I mean, that's, 10,000 a year or 30,000 that you've spent in 3 years leasing a car that you don't own at the end of the day. So yeah, you really have to think about that and look at your total financial situation.
Yeah, and don't
But yeah,
focus so much on the monthly payment. And we talk about this all the time in various aspects of your finances. Even we just talked about it with the car, with the home buying process. People focus on what they can afford on a monthly basis and don't realize that, like you said, it's always and forever. You're putting yourself in a set of handcuffs because you always have to earn on a monthly basis in order to be able to afford that thing. And you pay a lot more over time when you focus only on, can I afford this right now on a monthly basis? And then what about the other expenses that might come along?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how you get into that lifestyle creep.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some cons of leasing is, of course, there's mileage restrictions. So if you're one of those people that likes to take road trips, or you live in a city, where maybe you're out in the suburbs and you work in the city, you might have a 15, 20, 30 mile commute every day. And that could even be one way, that could really put some mileage and wear and tear on your car. So if you have a lease, that's not really a good thing. It's typically meant for people who don't drive their car very much. And typically the restrictions for mileage they can go anywhere from 7,500 on the low end to, I've seen about 12 to 15,000 each year is the max that you can drive. So also when you lease a car, there's potential for excess wear and tear charges. So if you're not taking good care of the car, or if it's, if it gets little dings here and there, then you'll be charged for those things when you turn the car back in.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be thinking about, like you said, some of these cons. And the mileage restriction one is the one that stood out to me because, like you said, as financial planners, our job is to see the things that we can't really foretell are going to happen in the future. So planning is all about, planning for worst case scenario, planning for things that you're not thinking. And some of the pieces that I see when people are making a financial plan on their own is that they don't really think about the fact, like, they had to get the house that they could afford. Well, it's outside of the city, it's an hour outside. They're commuting back and forth every day. Well, now they got the car that they could afford on a monthly basis because it goes with the house they could afford. But the two things don't collaborate because now you're in this lease situation where you're over your miles and now you're paying extra for it. And that could hit you for $2,000-$3,000 in penalties and fees and things like that. So it's important to be thinking about your full financial picture as you're making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and typically what happens if you go over the miles, there's like a certain amount per mile. So it might be like 20 cents per mile that you have to pay if you go over. And another thing to think about too, and this is a state by state thing, but I know in the state of Georgia, several years ago, they changed our annual ad valorem taxes to where you pay everything up front. So when you buy a car, and leasing is considered a purchase, then you have to pay taxes on the full value of that car at the time. So even though you're going to turn it in 3 years later, you had to pay taxes on that full amount. If you decide to buy another car, or lease another car, you're dinged with those taxes once again. So
yikes. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So they make a lot more money that way than charging you year by year, which is why they do it. But yeah, it's something that can really factor into your total payments.
Oh, MG. We got a really great episode I'm going to drop in the show notes of another financial planner that we're really good friends with, Angela Moore. She and a friend did a great episode. I mean, it taught me so much about car buying versus leasing and what to think about and all the hidden fees. So we'll make sure that that link is in the show notes, so that if you really are getting ready to buy a car or thinking about it, you can dive into the details and make sure you're properly prepared. Let's talk a little bit about the buying pros and cons.
Yeah. So with buying, obviously the pros are you have equity, you fully own the vehicle outright at the end of the loan term, or if you're able to pay cash for a car. When you own the car, you can sell it, you can trade it in at any time and get another car. So just, having that ownership is important.
I own a car and I get made fun of all the time, Chloe, because
Yeah. How old is your car, Lauren?
people keep trying to get me to get a new car. I'm not. I'm going to ride Harry till the wheels fall off. Harry was purchased in October of 2008. And it was actually a 2009. So I was very fancy. I was getting it, 2009 fresh off the lot before it even was like ready to really hit the streets. But me and Harry are still rolling and it is 2022. He has 171,000 miles on him. And I feel like I got every penny of my money out of it. I think it was about 30, 35 grand back in the days for a Honda. I don't know how much it costs now, but I definitely feel like I got my money's worth. I bought tires twice to the tune of $1,500. I just bought them recently, so I know exactly how much the 4 tires cost for this car. But yeah, owning outright has been great for me because not having a car payment is a super duper blessing and just like a much better way for me to organize my monthly expenses and my finances and not have as much stress about earning, to make sure that I can get from point A to point B, especially because I work remotely. I wouldn't be driving the car that much anyway. And yeah, I would feel kind of weird having to go to work to be able to pay a car note to drive a car, to drive a car very infrequently.
Yeah, and that was a big thing too with a lot of people during COVID. We were all stuck at home. We couldn't go anywhere. And I had a lot of clients paying big car payments for a car that was sitting in their garage the whole time or sitting outside. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and I have a 2015 and yeah, I plan on driving it until I can't anymore. so yeah,
here it comes.
Yeah, like the only reason I got that 2015 was because I had a car that was 11 years old and I got in a car accident and it was totaled. But otherwise, I would have kept that car longer.
And that's one of the hard things about having an older car is like when you get here, there's like, we don't have any parts for this. We can't fix this. Girl,
Yeah.
you need a new car.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other cons related to car ownership.
Yeah. So the other thing is, you can have a higher down payment and monthly payments. So typically, if you're going to finance a car that you buy, you might want to put like a little bit more down just so the payments are more affordable. Versus with a lease, you don't really want to put very much down. And so that's just something that you kind of have to budget for and make sure you're prepared for. Like we said, theoretically, buying the monthly payments would be higher. But for some of these people, at least luxury cars, the lease payments could be higher. Um, and then, there's the long-term maintenance cost. You mentioned getting tires. There's, all of the different things that you have to do over time, just, getting the brakes repaired and, just all the flushes that you have to do that I don't know what those flushes, do, but, but every time I go to the dealership, they recommend something. So yeah, I mean, just all the long-term maintenance over time, costs a lot. But when you factor in, even I remember with my 11-year-old car that I had before the one I have now, I had to do like $2,000 or $3,000 worth of work on that car. And I thought about it long and hard. And I was like, if I can keep this car for another year or two, that's definitely cheaper than buying a car and having that monthly payment.
Absolutely. I mean, even though those tires I was just talking about, like $1,500 comes out to about $125 a month. Like, I don't know very many people that have $125 a month car payment. And like I said, I had the other tires for 8, 9 years, something like that. So really, if we want to stretch it out over that time period, the tires become very inexpensive. But there are maintenance costs, like you said, car washes, oil maintenance. And I think that leads back to the point of what you brought up about budgeting. We bring up the big bad B word all the time and people cringe. They're just like, but these are the things that, like they said, are not emergencies. They're not going to pop up on you. They're just things that we don't want to account for. So you do occasionally get a car wash. Some people are very, every week, every month, every third Sunday or whatever the case may be. But most of us kind of roll up here and there and it's money out of your pocket. Oil changes, you don't know exactly when they're coming, but you know that that's a necessary part of keeping your car maintained. Tires are another one. And so having a fund that's always kind of rolling to make sure that these things are taken care of. And to your point, down payments on a car. Reason that we see such high car payments and things are so stressful for people is because they always try to do some no money down situation. No money down means much higher monthly payment. And that's where you kind of end up in trouble sometimes. It's like, I got to be able to swing this because I need this car now. We know our car is going to die. I know that Harry is not going to make it probably another 10 years. If he does, like, hallelujah, like I am winning at life, but I have started to prepare for the day that he dies instead of being like, oh man, he died. I'm caught off guard. I can't believe he died on me. And now I need to get somewhere. You know that your car is not going to make it forever. So when one car is coming in the door, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be preparing for the next one so that you do have a reasonable down payment to keep your payments affordable. Or better yet, you buy your car in cash because that's a thing too.
Yeah, and if you're able to pay off your car, if you keep it, as long as you can. Typically, if you just continue to save that car payment on a monthly basis, you could possibly have enough to pay cash for a new car, like when the time comes.
That is strategy. That's the planning. That's the ing. That's the action. Come on, you can do it.
Yeah. But yeah, just overall though, like leasing will cost you more in the long run. The most financially responsible thing to do is to buy a used car. So a car that's maybe 2 to 3 years old, typically one that comes off of a lease, and then keeping that car until it dies. So that's the most responsible thing to do. Of course, everybody has their reasons for wanting to buy or lease. Everybody, likes different types of cars. But for Lauryn and I, as you can tell, we just use it to get from point A to point B, and we don't really care about it being fancy. So if that's the case, the best thing to do is definitely get a used car and keep it forever.
And we do recognize that, like you said, there's different strokes for different folks. So if cars are really something important to you, you grew up and you fixed cars with your parent, or, this was something that you've always dreamed of and you care about it, that's absolutely your right to have a cool, fancy car. The thing I like to warn against is doing it because everyone else is doing it or doing it for, status symbols or, because you feel some sort of pressure that you need to have a nice car. I would say keeping up with the Joneses or the Jakes or the Janes or whomever is out there that you feel like you need to keep up with is not a good reason to break the bank or put yourself in a tough financial situation on a regular basis, in order to be able to, park something nice. People may or may not even see. Like I said, most of the time you go to work, you go in the building, no one's looking at your car. So, and that's where we spend most of our time during the day. So is it absolutely worth it to you? Why is this important to me? Why do I value it? Why is it going to improve my life, not the lives of the people around me, but my life? Is an important question to ask if you are into car purchases. Maybe you're one of the people that loves, like on weekends, going for road trips. You and your family go everywhere via road trips, or you got a lot of family nearby and you're popping around, like in the Northeast, people hit Philly and New York and, DC. They're bouncing all over the place all the time. Like it might be a good reason to, have a more comfortable car or something that has a little bit of extra bells and whistles on it. So, like I said, you need to do what is right for you. Me, I like to travel, but not by car. So my travel budget is going to be set up for plane tickets.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a really good book that I think you probably read it too, Lauren, or you might be reading it right now, but Psychology of Money. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But there was a story in there. It's a really good book, just about kind of just different stories about the psychology of money. And so one of the stories was talking about, seeing people with fancy cars. And so the author was saying, when he was younger, he saw someone getting out a super fancy car. And, typically if someone is trying to keep up with the Joneses, they're thinking that people are looking at their cars and impressed with them. But he was like, I didn't care about the person. Like, I didn't even know who the person was that got out of the car. I'm envisioning myself in that car. And, it's like, I don't even know who the person is, or couldn't recall what they look like. So it's like this continuous cycle of people, having that vision. And that's what gets people into financial trouble.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like you're enamored by the car and you're watching people being enamored by your car, but also the people don't know you, remember you, want to know you or anything. So that's something to consider. And we did just finish the Psychology of Money in our November book club. So as the year is winding down, we are getting ready. We're doing our December book now. You missed the boat for that. Never fear. In January, we'll be starting a new book. So if you're trying to further educate yourself, become more financially literate, why not jump in the book club? We'll put a link to that in the bio too.
Yeah. So let's just let's skip down and talk about electric cars. I know we talked about that at the top of the hour. So just one of the things with me that I ask clients when they say they're interested in electric cars is, why do you want an electric car? I think a lot of people say that they want to get an electric car to save on gas, and that argument is just not realistic. And we'll talk about that in a second. But, are you really doing it because you care about the environment? You want to save the environment? Or is the excuse of saving on gas really why you're wanting an electric car?
And when I think about this, I always get the electric car thing from clients as well. And I'll say most of my clients are in California that want the electric car. And I was looking up some stats in preparation for this podcast. And it looks like somewhere between 39 and 42% of all electric cars are purchased by people in California. So it's definitely a thing there. But what I hear is, well, I get access to the HOV lane. It's going to save me so much time to be able to jump in the HOV lane. So the main reason that the marketing over in California is winning is that traffic is terrible. People driving the car by themselves, which does not give them access to the HOV lane, but they're willing to pay more for this electric car in order to jump on over in the HOV lane and, think they're doing a great thing for the environment. So tell us more, Chloe, about these electric cars and how it really goes down.
Yeah. So, when you think about gas, we have record high gas prices. And I actually have a friend that came from California recently, and the prices are significantly higher than they are here in the South and in Georgia and Texas. But yeah, even if you spend $100 a week on gas, which is $400 a month, that's about $5,000 a year that you're spending on gas. So if you're for some of my clients that are looking at buying an electric car versus just a regular car, that the car could cost double the amount. So, maybe a $30,000 car would be a $60,000 car that's electric. So is it really if you're spending $30,000 more for a car to save 5,000 a year in gas, is that really going to pay off?
Because that math is not mathing.
But yeah, so just really think about, why do you want the car, and then also, can you afford the car? Because they are significantly more. There are tax credits out there. You can get up to $7,500, but the credit, there's a few hoops that you have to jump through. So there's assembly, manufacturing, and other requirements that could limit the tax break that you get. So really, think about how much of a tax break can you get? And then also, how does this fit into your financial picture?
Yeah, and to your point, Chloe, I think one of the things to be thinking about as you think about this, oh, electric car, yay or nay, is like, does this all add up? Because we all get kind of sucked in to like, oh, this dress is on sale. It's marked down to $400 from 4,000. Like, what a steal. Um, you know, tax credits and things like that get really exciting for people, but ultimately it's like, I couldn't afford a $400 dress, and wow, I definitely couldn't afford a $4,000 dress. But now that it's 4,000 down to 400, I'm gonna figure out where to find a 400 when really the true answer is I can't afford this dress. Like my budget for my dress was $100. So what is your car budget? And not trying to kind of finagle or, what's the word? Make it seem like this is the right thing for you to do, even though it's a much more expensive thing to do. Make sure you do the math around what makes the most sense. Like you said, there's tolls that you're still paying. There's, cost to be able to charge the car. People are getting the battery installed. And one of the things I've heard about the electric cars is that the battery life is not that great. So just like anything else, like, phones and things like that, after a certain period of time, the battery starts to die. You got to go purchase a new battery, and they're like $15,000-$16,000 to be able to get a new battery to go in those cars. The other thing I've heard that's not so fun about these cars is that they're kind of like iPhones. Everybody knows iPhone was duping us at one point, and you couldn't do the update because they wanted you to go get a new phone, and doing the update was like wrecking your phone. I've heard that there's pretty similar things happening. So you get this electric car, you're like, oh, I saved so much money. There's so much, benefits to it. Even though it was a little bit more expensive on the front end, it's going to pay off in the long term. And then 3 years later, you need another one. That math doesn't math either. So just be mindful of some of the downfalls or the pitfalls that people or companies are using to market to us to make us buy things that we can't actually afford.
Yeah. And even going back to just kind of keeping up with the Joneses or following trends, we talk about that a lot on the Know Better, Do Better series. And, just really understand what's important to you. Like, if saving the environment is something that's important to you, like, how does that show up in other aspects of your life? Like, are you even recycling, or are you doing other things that are good for the environment? Or are you just, kind of on this bandwagon of wanting to get an electric car?
Ooh, you calling people out, Chloe? I saw you throw that in the regular trash and you could have recycled it, telling me you love the environment.
But yeah, so
it's true though. Like, we talk a lot about values and spending, making sure that your spending aligns with your values. You want that to be in all aspects of your life. So, if you want to do things that are healthy, like, are you driving your electric car to the gym, or are you driving it to Shake Shack? Which option are you choosing there? So are you living out full health, and is your spending aligning with your values overall? Or is this, like you said, one area where you're doing justifying? That's the word I was looking for earlier, where you're trying to justify the cost because it slightly aligns with your values and it's kind of convenient.
Yeah. So let's talk about some general tips about, buying and leasing. So the first thing is just, how do you tell how much you can afford? I know there's so many different, ratios and percentages out there. And so how do you approach that with clients, Lauren?
Oh boy. This is a tough one, because I think one of the biggest things is, like you said, people always come when they need the car. And so I always bring it up as a line item when we go through our initial budgeting. And they're like, no, our car is in great shape. And I'm like, let's put some money aside in order to be able to plan ahead for your car. And inevitably, something happens to their car well before we have a proper next down payment saved, or before we're actually ready to make the purchase. And so you have to kind of move money around. And so there's not an easy, like, it's always it depends sort of situation. I'm interested to see what benchmarks you're using with your clients.
Yeah, I don't have general benchmarks either, but because I think some of it has to do with, first of all, can you pay cash for the car, or is it something that would need to be financed? Um, if it's something that needs to be financed, then we have to look at all of your other debts and all of your other obligations. So, what is your rent or your mortgage payment? Do you have, six figures in student loans? Do you have, other things that you're having to pay for on a regular basis? If you have children, do you have $2,000 a month, daycare expenses or childcare expenses? So, just adding on an additional monthly car note, that could really affect your finances. So it's not just really, kind of following the, kind of rules of thumb here. It's really looking at your financial situation.
Yeah, and I like to ask lots of questions about like, what is plausible and what is necessary. So, from a plausible standpoint, you might say like, oh yeah, I can afford this payment, but that's not really what we're thinking about. Like when we're thinking plausibility, like you live in the Northeast and you need snow. You need something that's going to be able to get around in the snow. So is it plausible to buy a cute little convertible sports car? Probably not so much, sort of thing. What is actually practical is probably even a better word than plausible as you think about your needs. You have 3 kids, you might need a third row in your car, for good reason, because your 2 kids and your spouse in the car, and then you pick someone else up to take them to soccer practice or whatever. That's a good reason to have a third row. Just because you like big cars is not necessarily a good reason to go spend the money on the bigger vehicle. So we kind of walk through what are your absolute needs, and the necessities that are appropriate. And then I kind of back into, like you said, priority wise, like what's important to you. Is it saving for your kids' education? Is it, you said, getting these student loans paid off? Is it maxing out your retirement? Okay, in light of what you shared with me are the priorities, I think we should buy a cheaper car. Your budget is not a $40,000 car, it's maybe a $20,000 car, or it's a used car that would have been in that $40,000 range to be able to get the price down. And that's kind of how I like to back into it with clients, is like a conversation. There's no black and white answers though.
Yeah. And I really like the point that you brought up too about thinking about what's practical. If even if you don't have children now, if you're planning on having children in the next year or two, you probably don't need that convertible because you're going to have to trade it in at some point and you might be upside down if you're making payments. So
my husband bought not a two-seater, but he has a Mustang, and that back seat is not a back seat. And I was like, you the one said you want a kid. Like, I don't, this is not aligned. Your spending is not aligning with what you said with you value. So I don't know what we're gonna do about this car, but can't get no car seats can fit in that car. Like,
yeah.
it's not a thing.
But yeah, so just think about, all the different aspects. We talk about this with home buying too. Just, how does this fit into your lifestyle, and then what can you afford? So just, when it comes to buying cars, I know there's, kind of tips and things. So we talked about, the first thing is just looking for a used car, if possible, and getting a car that's maybe 2 to 3 years old, because by that time, typically most of the depreciation has happened in the car, and so you're really getting a better value. And if you hold it until the end, or until it dies, that's really the best financial decision.
I like it. I like it. That is good advice.
Yeah. And then just some other things, think about, just as far as the total cost, don't think of things on a monthly payment, like we've mentioned so many times before. So just think about what's the total cost that you can afford. If you're going to buy a used car, a lot of times you have the option of, not only financing through the dealership, but you could also finance through your bank or a credit union. Credit unions have great rates. And so if you wanted to maybe shop around and get some financing in place before you go to the dealership, that's always a good option as well, to kind of see, what can you get on your own, instead of just kind of defaulting to financing through the dealership.
Amen to that. Shopping around is a key piece of the puzzle. Do not take the first thing that comes your direction. Oh, but this guy was so nice and it was wonderful, and I'm just going to get my car from them. I'm sure they're nice, but their job is also to be nice because they need to close the deal. So make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck as it pertains to the value that's available, because car prices are kind of negotiable and they're kind of made up, if you will. So you don't want to be the person that gets got. But I'm also not a big proponent of like haggling to the point where someone is not going to make very much money. People are trying to earn a living. So you want to be mindful of that. But yeah, you don't want to get taken either. So make sure that you do some shopping around to kind of get a better understanding of what is appropriate price for this vehicle based on, the information that's out there.
But yeah, do some research, know your numbers, know what the total value of the car needs to be, because that's what you should negotiate over the payment. But know what that total value of the car should be that you're going to pay, or the total price that you want to pay, and try to work towards that, knowing, kind of what the rates are going to be and what the financing is going to look like for you. So that's really a good way to approach buying. Also, just don't be afraid to walk away, whether you're buying or leasing. People get in trouble, like you said, Lauren, with getting things kind of last minute or when they have to, whether they, get in an accident or the car just all of a sudden dies and they're not prepared. And so when you're desperate, they can smell it.
Ooh, and they will take advantage of it. The worst scenario I've seen a couple, each of them had a Honda, and it was $700 a month for each of them to drive a Honda. And I'm just like, what kind of Honda could ever cost $700 per month?
Yeah.
And it was a tough situation where they folded a previous car into the car payment, and some other things that happened, plus not favorable interest rates. And I mean, $1,400 a month is a gargantuan amount to be going out of anyone's budget on a monthly basis. But then on top of that, for, what is known as an economical car, that's where, like I said, you can really end up being taken, and people don't know that you're, not in a great situation overall, because like this is the actual thing that you're having to deal with on a monthly basis. So, and to your point, the other thing I'll say, Chloe, is like looking at the total car price, doing the math on like, how much is this going to cost me over time? Because you're paying interest on a car. So, it's $40,000 and it's over 5 years and you get like a 6 or 7% interest rate. It's not $40,000 for that car over those 5 years. So do that math. So then you can see like, ooh, this is what I'm really paying for the car. Oh my goodness. And it might cause you to make some different decisions. If if you're for some reason tied to 40,000 as a number, that might say, hey, let me go get a $30,000 car for the same interest rate, because I can only pay 40,000 over the next 5 years.
Yeah. And two more things that I'll add with that. Interest rates are a little bit higher right now. You can refinance car loans. And, I've helped, back in the day when interest rates were high like they are now. We kind of had a dip in the last few years, but yeah, when prices went down, we helped clients refinance cars and houses. So that's something that, that you can always look to do down the road. And then the other thing I'll say is, think about like how long you want to pay on this car. I've seen these 72-month car loans, and I think there's 84 now, which is crazy. But yeah, you want to try to make sure you can afford the car. I'd say max 5 years, but ideally, 3 if you can.
Yep. And why are they stretching it out? Because it makes the monthly payment lower. So nicer monthly payment for you. You're like, oh, I can afford this, even though it's going to cost me way more money because I got to pay another 1 or 2 years of interest on this thing. You think that you're winning, but actually the financier is the one that's winning. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, and by year 7 or 8, like you're getting into maintenance and repair territory, like significant maintenance and repair territory. So, you don't want to be paying a car note and having to pay for astronomical maintenance.
Amen. Hallelujah. The last thing I'll say about car purchasing is don't be afraid to write a check for your car. Let's normalize, like, car payments don't have to be a thing. A lot of people come from a background where everybody always had one all the time and you don't know anything different. But we talk about creating wealth and closing racial wealth divides and gender wealth pay gaps and things like that. And some of that is literacy, and changing the narrative and changing the way we think about money. Like, we can write a check for a house. We can write a check for a car. We can write a check for other big expenses. We don't always have to have a loan. It takes us managing our finances in a different way so that we can just be able to write those checks. It takes being a little bit more conservative in one area so that you can have that thing in another area.
Absolutely. So then let's talk about tips for leasing a car. So one of the things with leasing a car, I mentioned this before, like briefly, but when you're buying a car, you typically might want to put down, if you have to finance, you want to put down a bigger down payment so that you can control those mortgage or not the mortgage, the car payments over that time. So with leasing, it's not really advantageous to put a big payment down. And with leasing, you typically are kind of negotiating that monthly payment. And so you also would negotiate the miles that you're going to drive. If you want to get a lower payment, you could do, like I said, 7,500 miles a year, up to, I think, 12 or 15,000 is the highest that it can go. But all of those things are kind of levers that you can pull to adjust the payment of your lease.
Yeah, I think that is excellent stuff to be thinking of as you think about like getting into the lease. The other thing I'll say about leasing a car is being mindful of, I'm flaking. Scratch that. Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice, Chloe. All right, let's wrap it up. Or do you have anything else about tips for leasing before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, just make sure that you still, also negotiate. Leases can be negotiated. Don't be afraid to walk away, once again. And those are the big things.
All right. Well, let's shut this thing down with our money quote. So we always end up an episode with a money quote for today. What do you have, Chloe?
Yeah. So this one is by the Sammy Davis Jr. And so if it says, I had more clothes than I had closets, more cars than garage space, but no money.
More clothes than closets. I mean, there was stuff all over the place. That was not a very nice and neat house. Hey, not talking about you out there. I'm just saying, like, if you got more stuff, then you got places to put stuff. Maybe you need to sell some of that stuff. And more cars than garage space. And we know those cars cost money. Cars are not cheap. So maybe not being a collector of things, but being a collector of dollars so that you can use those funds to live out the life you want later on down the road. Because at some point, we're all not going to be able to or to want to continue to work and earn dollars. So we need to stack some of those dollars for that time period.
Yeah. And just, think about a lot of times with some of these like material things that, that we all get attracted to, from time to time. A lot of times when you look at people spending, the most happiness comes from experiences and really, spending your money on experiences versus things. Those things, the glitz and glamour and just the appeal of it all, it kind of goes away. Those things get old. And so, just making sure you use your money towards things that are going to have long lasting memories or that have long lasting value are important.
And that's a perfect way to wrap up because we are in the holiday season. We are T-minus 5 days away from Christmas. Tons of other religious holidays right now are taking place or have started to take place. And what are we doing? We're buying things as, last minute because we don't want to show up empty handed and they're material things. Your presence is appreciated. You spending time with those people are the memories that are being created, the laughs, the jokes, the fun memories. Those are the experiences. So don't fret if your budget is funny and, you're down to the wire and you feel like you need to do something. I think showing up will be enough. And the people that really care about you will appreciate you being there, even if you don't hand over something. You should not have to buy anyone's love or compassion or kindness. This is the season where we remember those things, and this is also the season where you start thinking about what you want for the next year. If you want something different than what you previously had, you want more money in your bank account, you want to save more, you want to retire more, you want to have money to be able to write a check for a car in cash, like maybe don't go buy that sweater that you just are picking up so there's something in a box to hand over to fill in the name relative. Maybe keep that money in your bank account and, like you said, really enjoy your time with said relative instead. Have those jokes, have those laughs, and get ready for your goals in 2023.
Absolutely.
All right, we have done yet another episode. We've closed out 2022. We are so looking forward to seeing you in 2023. Enjoy your holiday season, whichever holiday you are celebrating. Even if it's no holiday, enjoy this time of rest, relaxation, quietness, because people are turning down for the next 2 weeks to turn up and get ready for the new year. I'll see you next time.
Bye.